Hello and welcome to Just for Today. I'm Jamal Normie.
I'm Miranda, the addict.
And we're going to talk about giving it to God.
Giving it to God. A little bit of background. Okay. You're a normie.
I'm a normie.
He grew up normal.
I grew up normal. No, I mean, everyone has issues. It's not easy, but it is possible. Just knowing what you're getting into when you're dating an addict. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of putting yourself in their shoes. I think I have a lot of clocked hours going to NA meetings. You're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to learn back to a background. So I've never done drugs. I've never wanted to do drugs. I've done drugs once and almost died. But that's a story for another day. Grew up in a good household, good church. I mean, nothing's perfect, but and when I met Miranda and she was having her issues, I knew what to do, where to go to. It just all came back to me. We'll let Miranda go on a little bit of her backstory.
So, I was on drugs for, actually over 2 decades, if you think about it. But I had a normal childhood. I don't have any traumatic experiences or, anything that I can pinpoint that would lead me to the drugs. It started off more of recreational, hanging out with friends. But again, it's still wrong to do even at that age because you're so young. You don't know better. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. I got pregnant by the time I was 18. I had my son. And then it jumped even further into the drugs because I used it as a crutch to be motivated and to have the strength to do what I needed to do to take care of my son. So the drug was my coffee per se every day, but then it turned into, I needed it to function, and so I ended up starting a double life for a good decade, so my son's pretty much his whole life I was on drugs, but he didn't know I was that quote unquote, soccer mom. Nobody knew I was on the drugs. I was a functioning tweaker. Then, life came to a screeching halt. I thought I was gonna lose everything, but it was a turning point in my life that I needed. It was my rock bottom that I needed, and Jamal happened to be in my life during that time, and and it's not funny, but it's funny how he didn't have all the tools to help me get through it. And so again, he was raised in church with a good home, and he knew logic, and he was more sane than I was, and he knew where to direct me, and he took me to church. Bottom line, he took me to church. In the midst of me going to psychiatrics, going to, NAs, and, still getting help that way, that helped me out. But what really did it for me is actually going to church, finding God, and in church, finding God. That's my number one. You put him first. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today, so I give all thanks to God for getting me through what I went through, I could sit here and say, well, why did that happen? It happened because it happened. God has a plan, and that was his plan, and it led us together, to become where we are right now. And so now we feel like we have to pay it forward, and if we can help somebody else, that's, that would make us more happier than to just, keep it within us.
Giving it to God for both of us. It's not just her. She's not the only one learning from all this. I'm learning every day as well. But you have to want to do that. It's one step at a time, but at the same time, you got to understand it's going to be a long road, very long road, ups and downs, bumps.
If looking back 2 years from now and knowing what we went through, all of the things we went through, it's because of the grace of God that he's still here with me. I'm still clean and sober and functioning, but, he's had to learn a lot of patience, like a lot, and it's not normal for, couples to go through that, it's like there's a certain part of me that says, well, why is he going through that? He didn't choose to do drugs. He didn't choose this, you know, having to have somebody go into recovery and deal with all their crap, you know. So in the midst of it all, he's learned a lot, not just because, you know, he's not a drug addict, but just the journey that we both had together, finding God, him finding God again, and us going through the journey together. He's learned a lot, especially patience. Number one is patience.
A whole lot of patience.
I don't know how he does it. Yeah.
God. And again, it all comes back to God. Like, I couldn't have done this without God. She couldn't have done this without God. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I hear all the time in the meetings, you know, give it to your higher power. But it's God. It really is God. Mm-hmm. And going through stuff like this, it sucked. It wasn't great, but there was a reason why we went through it, and we feel like it is to help other people in their darkest times, in their darkest hours, when you're going through this, to know that you can, it's possible. Even if you're not with someone, you can do it by yourself, or whatever the case is. God is God.
And what we mean by giving it to God, because, you know, I had to learn, I was an infant, so I didn't know anything, okay? So you have to break it down to me like I'm 2 years old. What it meant to give it to God, no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're, you know, I had a lot of issues with my emotions. I couldn't handle my emotions. If I was sad, I was dying because I was so sad. You know, my emotions were so extreme, and I didn't know how to physically handle those. But giving it to God, you talk to him, you pray to him, you say, okay, God, you know what? I don't know what to do with my feelings right now. Or if it's a situation in our relationship where we're going through something, and okay, I know I made a mistake, but I'm still frustrated and I don't want to admit to it, or whatever it may be, you just have to stop and just say, okay, God, you know what? It's in your hands. I even remember having issues with my son during this time, and you know, and I'm, you know, we joke about it where he had to tell me, he's like, Miranda, you're arguing with your 16-year-old. You know, I'm like, why am I arguing with my 16-year-old? Because I was so emotional and controlling, I didn't know how to handle all of that. So I literally just gave it to God. Instead of me trying to control the situation, you know, again, control is a big issue in my life. You know, I just said, okay, God, that's your child. You handle him. Let's figure this out. Not just have you figure it out, but just show me what do I need to do or what needs to happen. And he'll open up doors. He'll put a thought in your head. He'll, you know, if you give it to God, that means you're not doing it for yourself. You want to do what God wants you to do. And if it's all lined up with God, and it'll happen, you won't have as many hurdles getting through it. I'm not saying your kid's not going to act up, because they're going to act up. You're going to go through hurdles no matter what it is with relationships or with your kids or your family. You're going to have those hurdles, but it's a matter of being able to get through it. And if you have God by your side, he will absolutely get you through it. And so that's what we mean by giving it to God.
God doesn't necessarily take away what you're feeling, but he gives you the tools to handle it, you know. So you're digging a hole. Are you digging a hole with your hands? Or are you digging a hole with a shovel?
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's more of you're still going to go through things. You're still going to have issues, but giving it to God, tools to handle whatever situation you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
And even with me giving it to God, you know, he put it in my head. You got to change how you think about the person. You know, it's not in a negative way, but you know, you got to think of it like, what would you do if it was your child in this sort of situation? You know, if you really love this person, you're gonna be tested. You know, you don't throw your child out. You don't, you know, you try to put yourself in their situation, and you got to understand that. So if she was doing drugs for 15 years, more than 20 years, where was she when she was doing those drugs? Time kind of stopped mentally for her, because she wasn't feeling anything. She wasn't going through the things that a normie would have gone through to get to where we are today. You know, you make mistakes throughout time, but it's all at once for her, you know, for her or whoever you're dealing with, you know. So God's taught me that. God's taught me to listen. God, giving it to God. You know, he's taught me to be patient. He's taught me to not respond just like you would with your child. You know, you can't respond in anger to things. You have to stop. breathe, pray maybe, and then look for the answers that he gives you. That's what giving it to God means for me. And when you really stop to think about it that way, if you're dealing with a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, it puts it into perspective. But when you give things to God, he'll respond back to you.
Right. And there's been times where I give it to God and it's not instantaneous that he comes back to you. It's not, there's things that I had to give to God that I had to be patient and waiting. If I knew I have, a court date coming up for something and, I have my anxiety going on, I pray about it. And I prayed every night, giving it to God. Help me, guide me, let me know what do I need to do, what do you wish for us, God, and then when that time comes, when the day comes, and when you have that appointment or when you have whatever it is you need to go through, you'll have that insight. God gives you that insight, And there was a time where I had to question, I was praying to God and, certain things were going on and I had to question it. I'm like, wait, is this God telling me that I should go this way? And, and so I questioned it. But what I did was I reached out to my other, my church family, those that are and you also have to be surrounded by like-minded people. That's what I learned. So, you have to get rid of those other friends or those other people, negative thinking, like-minded people, and you have to surround yourself with, those who do have faith in God or who do, have the same beliefs as you. And that's what I did. You pray to God, but you also, we live in the world, so we have our human contacts as well. And so reaching out to my church families, and I kind of, reached out to them and kind of explained what was going on and said, well, how do I know this is God's, way of telling me that this is how it should be? And they don't give you an answer. They're not going to tell you, oh, yes, it was, or no, it wasn't, but you get that advice, you get that opinion, and again, God works in mysterious ways to where he can work through those people, and he could be giving insight to those people who are then in turn talking to me, so God works in amazing ways, but ultimately giving it to God. If you go through God, he will find a way to get to you and comfort you and help you get through whatever it is you need to get through.
Like I was talking about earlier, tools, thinking back to stuff that I've gone through, God was already giving me the tools to deal with the situation. It's crazy to think because I never would have thought, if you would ask me 4 years ago about any of this, I would think you were crazy. I wouldn't have never. I would have never thought. But then once you sit back and you look at everything that you've been through, everything that's happened, you're like, oh wow, you could see this bigger plan in place. I've done customer service jobs, I've done things where I had to deal with people, that builds patience, that builds, understanding how people's minds work. But most of the things that I've gone through set me up to be able to deal with this sort of situation. So, again, when I say tools, they're all tools. It's a bigger picture than just simply, getting an answer to something or taking something away. Your feelings or whatever the case is. It's guidance. It really is. And
through up to your purpose, though.
Yeah. It was bad. There are a lot of stuff that we went through, but again, the bigger picture is being able to help other people that are going through this, and then so on and so forth. We help you help somebody else,
right.
You help somebody else, you pay it forward, you keep it going. And, eventually we can all be there. God does it. My whole idea of what God was when I was going to church, it seemed, when I was little, it seemed like, you're being told what to do, a chore, something you don't want to do, and so I left, I got away from church. But now, looking back and seeing through this, it's not, it's the same thing you would do if you're a parent. You love your kid, you give some rules, some guidelines to follow. You're not making them do it, hey, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. You should be, figuring out what, getting to know somebody before you have sex, because why? You end up having a kid, and then you end up having to pay child support or all these things. It's not a necessary rule, but it's a logical guideline. That's just one of the many things. But anybody gets told what to do, you feel like you're getting told what to do, you're gonna go the opposite way. But it's so much more than that. It's crazy. It's not even just necessarily us, but it's bigger than that. But just how I see the world in general. It just means something more, something a whole lot more than what I would have ever thought it was. Mm-hmm. But again, though, I had to go through the stuff that I went through to get to this point. She had to go through the stuff that she went through to get to this point, and now we're meeting somewhere in the middle.
And if we would have we knew each other in high school, so we did cross paths growing up. But if we tried to make this work any other time, it wouldn't have. Like I had to go through my life, he had to go through his life, and then we met at the perfect time that we needed. Not met. We came together at the time that we had to come together, no matter the circumstances. It was just meant to be. Again, God has a plan. We don't know that plan, but if let's say if I were introduced to God and Jesus at a younger age, maybe I wouldn't have gone through this path. But so be it. Every person is different. There are those who know Jesus and God from childhood on, and they keep that path, which is great. But then there's others that don't. I wasn't raised in it. He was raised in it. I had my lifestyle, and he left, but then ultimately he came back. So in this world, we're just a little droplet. But for whatever reason, God has a plan for us to as long as we come back to him. He ultimately was the one that made us.
Yeah, and again, though, it's a bigger picture. Like you could be watching this and being like, God, blah, 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 blah. But because you don't know, if you don't know something, you don't, you're not going to understand.
Or if you're not experiencing it and you can't relate to it.
Yeah.
There's times, people were talking God, and I was so like, if you mention that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to hear it. Because again, I was in a different position in my life. I wasn't ready to hear it, and you have to just be ready. It has to be your time. And we're hoping that this reaches people at the time that they need to hear this, and ultimately have you keep coming back. As long as you keep coming back, you'll stay clean.
Yeah. And that's what it's about, ultimately, staying clean. Because even when I hear in the meetings, you give it to your higher power, mm-hmm. It's, I guess I get why people don't want to claim that it's God, but it's still God. I'm noticing that things I'm learning, relearning, or learning from the Bible is the same thing as the steps. The steps that you guys have to go through. It's the same exact thing. Ultimately, it's teaching you to be a better person. Like, I couldn't imagine having to go through and apologize to anybody that I've wronged in the past. Like, that's just crazy to me. You guys have the higher standard of what you guys have to go through than what us normies have to go through to an extent. I guess it's more on, it's also, again though, it's in such a shorter time frame that you guys have to go through that. So, whereas we've gone through it through our entire life, so that, again, that's God giving me the understanding to understand what she's going through, understand what you're going through potentially, to get to where you need to be. So I couldn't have done that without God,
And also, I think the reason why is to give it to a higher power, because most of the time, pretty much all the times, those who are in addiction, we're very self-centered. It's all about me. I control. It's I had to learn, giving up my will. I didn't know what that meant. Give up my will. What do you mean? Because it's all about us. I have to control everything. And so learning how to give it to God, you're no longer in charge of that. You're not controlling it. Because obviously, me trying to control it, my addiction, and even trying to get clean, obviously it didn't work. Let me move away. Let me move 20 miles away and I'll get away from these people. It didn't matter. I still found my way back. Let me start a family and nope, didn't matter. I started a double life. You can sit there and try, to control the situation and to get clean, but not until you let go of your will, and you give it over to your higher power. And higher power, because not everyone believes in God. There's many different religions. In the beginning, there's a story out there where you can have your higher power as a potato. The point is not you being in control of it. You have to give it to someone else and help guide you. And so, that's pretty much it, 'cause we're so self-centered, a lot of us who are in addiction.
When you find out that higher power that entire time was actually God, then doors will open, things will change. It's you're not alone. There's someone more powerful out there that has your back, and that's the main thing. To get out of yourself. That's kind of the main thing that I'm noticing when I go to NA. And a lot of people thinking that they have to do things on their own. You don't have to do it on your own. There's God that's given it to God. And that's the main thing. Well, thank you for joining us on Just for Today, and remember, keep coming back.
Keep coming back. Stay clean.